In today's business world, being an average CEO is no longer an option. That's why we're committed to equipping you with the resources and the tactics necessary to not just survive, but to thrive. You're listening to Not Your Average CEO Lifeline podcast, where we are more than just a voice in the crowd. Hi, everyone. Not Your Average CEO Lifeline podcast season 5. Today, I am joined by Ryan Smith. We are going to talk about how most leaders don't fail because they lack the motivation, the heart, the commitment to their mission, but at some point they struggle, whether it's because the organization outgrows what they've had, the way that things are being led. And Ryan's expertise can really lead us on this conversation and how leaders can stop thinking about their 1 year plans and just being in that survival mode that we know happens and start building long-term organizations that are meant to really serve people and last for generations. So, Ryan, I'm so grateful to have you on today. Welcome. Can you tell the audience, briefly about yourself, your journey, and the work that you do?
Absolutely, Nicole. Thank you again for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity. So let's dig right in. I've been a CEO for nearly 3 decades. I've had a professional work career for over 35 years. Started my career in the 80s working with children with attention deficit disorder and hyperactivity disorder, doing neuromaturational battery testing. Worked in a partial hospitalization program for a period of time, and then I started my first company serving folks with intellectual and developmental disabilities, primarily in the community-based and residential services space. Ran and built that business for nearly 2 decades, and then I founded Inperium Inc., who will be 10 years old on the 12th of January. So that company is reaching a double-digit milestone of being a decade in existence. And Imperium is a consolidated constellation of companies that, through their interrelated partnerships, create mission sustainability and advancement. So it's really exciting for me, Nicole, to start in the front lines of providing behavioral health and human services as a direct care worker, clinician, counselor, individual conducting intelligence quotient testing for diagnoses, to all the way up through and including being the CEO now of my second large nonprofit company. So that's a little bit about me. Only child, grew up in central Pennsylvania, am 54 years young at this point, and really looking forward to the conversation today.
Quite an extensive background. I'm so glad that you shared it. Um, so let's dive into talking about the health of organizations. You've led, numerous organizations through massive transformations. What's really the moment you realized that thinking small was actually the biggest risk to a mission or an organization? When was that turning point for you?
Yeah, Nicole, all nonprofits and all businesses kind of have these waypoints in their generation and their existence where they're met with differing challenges, whether it's back office infrastructure, meaning you don't have an adequately sized health record for your individuals that are receiving the services, you're undercapitalized to meet the cash flow and the day-to-day operational needs of your business. Your wait lists are growing because you lack infrastructure or access to talent to be able to support and serve those that so desperately need our services. So really, for me, going to scale and growing and diversifying is a way to assist with sustaining a mission and ensuring longevity of the nonprofit's life as it continues to grow and develop and have more impacts in the community.
Are there any, I know you mentioned like they're outgrowing their lists. Are there any thing that you can give our audience that they should, if they're listening now and they're thinking, is this me? That something that they may be feeling that they can say, okay, yes, I know I need to continue to listen. I need to write things down because this is definitely where it's going to hit home for me.
Yeah, we're generally all social workers running nonprofits, providing services to others in need. And a social worker mentality is we want to have the greatest impacts to as many people as possible. So I would imagine most of the leaders that are listening already know if they're in the situation where they're about to come to a crossroads And again, whether it be unable to open new programs or hire staff to ramp up to do new service offerings in the geographies where they're located, or look, diversify their geography into another town or community or state in some instances to provide the services that they're currently providing. You can feel that as a leader. You sense that the snowball is going downhill and getting larger and maybe a bit out of control. But there are signs that that starts to happen. You know, your overtime creeps up. You start to see staff burnout. You start to see some of your performance indicators wane, meaning from first point of contact to first service delivery, that becomes a little protracted or longer than what we'd like to see in our business. Those signs are pretty obvious. What's important is being sure to be doing the cross checks and recognizing and getting ahead of when you believe you're going to have that situation, and whether it's related to hiring staff, access to capital, access to fundraising and philanthropic awards. You really need to be out ahead of it just enough that it doesn't subsume you when it starts to gain the momentum that we all hope for as we sustain our missions.
Wonderful. So now let's think, okay, we know we need to make this change. How do you recommend that our listeners balance discipline, say, with compassion when they now know they have to lead through change, and change can be very uncomfortable, especially for our employees? And how do they find this really nice balance of doing so?
Nicole, it's important to have grit and a very short memory, meaning it's important as a CEO to take in all the feedback and listen to all of the information you're being given so that you can grow and make the right decisions. But you have to have grit. You have to have partners around you, meaning your board, your stakeholders, your grant award donors, your key staff have to understand clearly what the mission and vision and goal is and why the change is important and how change can be fun and good. We as humans want to do good things and work hard, and that gets us energized and excited. What we did yesterday makes us tired, but what we're going to do tomorrow energizes us and makes us excited. It's important that you get buy-in, not 100% buy-in, but you need majority buy-in from those around you so that they see the plot and understand what you're doing. Always checking in and making sure that you're not too far out in front of your team or the other stakeholders in what you're trying to manage and change. That's when it can be a bit unruly. If you're several yards away and a couple rights and lefts down the path of where you're heading and you don't have your team with you, having to stop and wait for them to catch up can really be detrimental to that change management.
You might not have a answer to this question, but I'm curious to know if you have any recommended activities or actions that leaders do to build that culture or build that guidance, whether it's um, some type of team building activity or something. Do you have any advice on that?
I do, Nicole. So COVID, right, taught all of us a lot about having to behave and act differently. Everyone's remote, sitting in their houses. You no longer have the familiarity of being down the hall from one of your coworkers, able to peek in and see how they're doing, how their weekend was. And that connection that we had pre-COVID was really strained during COVID. And then coming out of COVID, what we learned was we didn't necessarily need all that infrastructure. We could be more efficient, have a happier work staffing environment, be more cost effective because we didn't need real estate infrastructure and the costs associated with it. But what was strained was the partnerships and the team building and the leadership work that you get from being in one or two of the same buildings as a group on a consistent basis. So at Imperium, we hired an executive coach. That executive coach works hand in hand with me and five of the other executives. And we have monthly meetings throughout the country where we pull all of our 85 leaders together and do multi-day sessions of team building exercises. Some of them are fun, right? Like you're stranded on the moon and you have the following 8 things and you can only keep 3. What are you keeping and will you survive? And we do external team building exercises, top golf in teams as an example, and have competitive arrangements. Social events, we do very contrived dinners where we script the seating and then we do activities at the individual tables so people across the network can get to know themselves. So it takes on a very, very different approach and being contrived around how you try to create those partnerships. And that's through a year-long schedule of events. Locations are identified, and then we pull in other subject matter experts to come in and speak with the group around leadership or change management, how to deal with certain HR situations. So it's really been impactful for us, Nicole, to do that. And we are entering our 4th year of doing that, actually. And we've received a lot of positive feedback from the team that they really enjoy it. 35 companies in 20 states, over 10,000 employees. That's how we at Imperium manage some of that. Did I answer your question?
You definitely did. You definitely did. And I like the moon one. That's not one that I've used before, and I may have to use with my team because I really enjoyed that one. We do a lot of water coolers and different activities, but that's a good one. So I may have to steal it. I want to shift a little bit to not but to talking about when leaders stop thinking about how do we survive right now? What's the mentality shift to go from we're just making it this year, we want to meet this year's goal to a 10-year plan, generational plan? What really shifts for leaders in that mentality?
I think it's scary, Nicole, to have
It
to
is.
sit as a leader and think about making payroll next Friday,
Mhm.
to pivoting to what do we look like in 3 years or 5 years or 7 years. And I think when you are wondering how you're going to make payroll, I've lived that in my career. It's really hard to take those blinders off and look larger scale. But if you can find the courage to do it, and maintain the focus on making that payroll or meeting the immediate needs, but really looking outward, the strategy starts to become clear. And in that strategy, you almost cure some of those other short term issues because you learn a lot as you're marching towards the goals that in the moment seem very unachievable. And it really starts to help address the more short term goals. That's been my experience in my career.
Like that you said scared. I completely agree. And it's part of what I do on a daily basis. I'm a fractional COO. So I talk a lot with clients on how do we look at our 10-year plan, our 3-year plan, our 1-year plan, and reverse engineer and think about these things. And there's always that hesitation, and my job's to kind of, inch it out of them. But I'm really glad that you mentioned that word because I think that's really what they feel on the inside is uncertainty, and they're scared to, um, you know, think big picture. May I not meet that goal? I may not, but you have to think that way in order to grow. Otherwise, you're going to just move baby steps. I'd
Yeah,
love
and when
to.
we're scared, there's inaction, right? When you're
Mhm.
scared,
Yeah,
you freeze, you become sedentary, you become focused on the particular object or issue that's right in front of you, and that can really be detrimental to a business and to mission sustainability.
100%. I agree with you 100%. So I want to give our audience some practical steps that they can take. So if they're a CEO or leader listening, what advice would you give them, 2 to 3 steps to take this year to strengthen their organization, but also to not lose their soul and their um, North Star?
So no money, no mission, right? No mission, no money. Those narratives are interchangeable in the nonprofit space. I think you need to look at both of those with certain key aspects in mind. Mission. What are your actual foundational tombstone mission services that you are really good at, meaning outcomes are tremendous, people want your services, you can provide them in a fiscally responsible manner? What are your loss leaders or those programs and services that may feel good, may have been the very foundation of why the nonprofit was started, but they're really a drag? And make some hard decisions around what your foundational mission should be. Secondary or jointly alongside of that is going to be the efficiency of your back office. How much time, effort, and money am I using running my company for those services that are the furthest from the person we're supporting? Payroll, tax, HR, IT, cybersecurity. What are those costs and how are those impacting my end user service recipients? And how do I address those through partnerships, other types of business arrangements where we can use scale leverage to have buying power at lower cost than one smaller standalone organization. And then finally, Nicole, access to capital and reasonably priced and sourced capital. So not leveraging all your accounts receivable or all of your assets at some high interest rate note that protects your cash flows and gives you the ability to grow and advance, opening new programs, opening new facilities, ramping up to provide new services. All that requires cash and capital so that you can be sustainable and keep the core programs at home insulated from that 3 or 5 year plan. So looking at those three elements at the same time, giving no greater weight to any of them, in my experience with the companies that are part of our network, is an interesting balance that generally bears positive results.
Fantastic advice. My next question, I really want to know if our audience just listened to what you had to say and they are thinking to themselves, man, I feel stuck. I don't know how to put these steps into place. What do I do next? What's the thing that you would ask them to honestly question for themselves? If they're thinking, I don't know. I'm feeling real stuck right now.
Your job as a CEO is to get unstuck. You're the leader. We're the leader of our organization. So our staff, our stakeholders, our funders, our donors, our service recipients, their families are counting on us to not be stuck. There are many resources that are out there. Fractional COOs who
Mhm.
can come in and provide consulting advice on a 9 or 12 month interim basis to get you back on track. There are associations that can help you. There are accounting firms, consulting firms. There are folks like Imperium that provide varying degrees of partnerships and opportunities to help move organizations into mission sustainability. You really just need to first identify it. Now, if you've identified it and you want to take action, there are quite a few resources out there. In my experience, Nicole, people identify it, don't want to acknowledge it, or wait too long to acknowledge it when the conditions become too grave before they actually take action. So again, it's kind of about the nature of now, meaning every day you wait compounds the seriousness of a decision you don't take when you start to recognize that you're having an issue.
I see it too in my day to day. The CEO role takes a different type of behavioral style, right, than obviously a COO who's action driven, analytic, and they can often not want to also ask for help, right? It could be hard to say, as the leader of an organization, I need to raise my hand for help. I'm stuck, and I advise our listeners to just put your toe out there in the water and try it because it can be organizational and changing, really. Um,
So, Nicole,
so
CEO isn't chief everything officer.
that's correct.
It's
Yes,
chief
I've heard.
executive officer, and you should use a I to we conversation. So when I talk with our executives, if you're using I as a CEO and not we, you are likely headed for a problem because you can't, as the CEO, be the COO, the CFO, the treasury officer, the head clinician, the medical director. You need to be aware of the requirements of those positions, but you can't be chief everything officer, or you're really going to deter the mission sustainability and advancement of your business.
200% accurate. You just can't. You'll burn out. It's just not sustainable and it's not healthy. So I have two more questions for you, Ryan, before I we end our episode. But what piece of advice can you give our audience to go do right now to better their organization? And something small, just a little tidbit of, if you go do, take this action item, go do this today, it will be for the better of your business, your organization.
Host a town hall where you invite all of your stakeholders, employees, executives, and boards to come together and have an open dialogue with them around what they see and feel are the threats and opportunities in your business. They're going to know best from their lens, and that's going to be insightful for the CEO and their leadership to understand where they need to be looking and focusing their attention. Too many times we see companies who don't look for that feedback from a large enough group, generally because they're afraid to hear and learn what they believe they're going to hear. It's a risk you take to open up to a forum such as that, but I've found it to be very transformational, very transparent, and one person can get a lot of work done. 500 can get more than 500 times the work done of that one person. It compounds itself. So for me, I would arrange a focus group and ask the people closest to each of their areas what gets in their way, what's working, what's not, and what we could do better.
Wonderful. Wonderful. My last question, which is our question to every single guest on our podcast, is what does the phrase "not your average CEO" mean to you, Ryan?
I don't think, Nicole, any C-suite staff, CEO, COO, wake up in the morning to be average. So I believe not your average CEO is just another way of saying CEO. If you're in a chief position in any organization, you wake up every morning with your feet on the ground, wanting to be better than yesterday and wanting to achieve higher and better results than a year from now. So average isn't something that CEOs generally use to describe themselves.
Couldn't agree more. Thank you so much, Ryan, for joining me today. I really enjoyed your conversation. As someone who sat on several boards over the last couple of years, I really related to your mission and what you've had to give our audience as far as advice. But can you tell our audience where they can find more from you? We'll, of course, include it in our show notes, but we love for those listening just on audio to be able to hear it.
Sure. Imperium's website is www.inperium.org. There's a contact us link on the website. Please feel free to reach out. In the notes, please let me know that you listened to Nicole's podcast and that's how you found me, so that I can provide her that feedback for our work here today. Thank you again, Nicole, for the opportunity. I enjoyed the conversation.
Thanks, Ryan.
You've been listening to Not Your Average CEO Lifeline with your hosts Danielle Cuomo, CEO, and Nicole Glitchio, Els, COO. This podcast has been sponsored by Virtual Assist USA. If you'd like to know more about the hosts or exploring virtual assistant services, visit virtualassistusa.com for more information.